Welcome to VMblog's coverage of KubeCon CloudNativeCon 2022. Today, we have the pleasure of having Chris Chapman, who's the CTO of MacStadium. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Maybe you can start by giving us a quick overview of the company.
Yeah, so MacStadium has been around for about a decade. We're a software as a service for Mac cloud offering. We exist to serve the cloud and compute needs for Apple developers, specifically in the enterprise space. We do this in a lot of ways, but one of the things that really relates to KubeCon is we have a Kubernetes platform called Orka that we use to deliver infrastructure. And by combining this technology with the security and reliability and performance of our data centers worldwide, we're able to provide DevOps and dev tooling for the Mac ecosystem. And we have locations in Atlanta, Vegas, Silicon Valley, and Dublin, Ireland.
And Chris, how specifically does the company play in the ecosystem that's being discussed here at the KubeCon event?
Yeah, you can probably bucket us in, the Kube map. You would bucket us either in the cloud or the resource management sort of area. We are a cloud akin to an AWS or a GCE. Apple's a little bit of a unique animal, so we are not multi-tenant or public cloud, so it's dedicated cloud space. But we basically provide a managed Kubernetes control plane for Apple resources as a cloud to our customers.
And for the attendees at the event, what specific problems do you solve for them? Maybe you can talk about some use cases.
Yeah, the biggest reason MacStadium exists at all, again, is Apple developers, especially in a corporate environment, are required by Apple to build on genuine Apple hardware. There's really no cloud for that. There's really no ecosystem for that. And also, additionally, there's a problem where Apple build and tools are very different from the rest of how the world knows and builds tools in, say, AWS or anywhere else, especially when it comes to platforms like Kubernetes. So we solve the problem by enabling Mac for Kubernetes. So we bring Apple to the Kubernetes ecosystem, and then that in turn opens up the whole world of tooling and partners and technologies that exist in the Kubernetes space to Apple developers and to development teams as a whole. So it really levels the playing field for developers and DevOps engineers to use Mac as a resource in a Kubernetes cloud, just like they use Linux or Windows or anything else. And this helps them build and create applications and honestly manage infrastructure like it should be done in a corporate sense when you're doing it at scale versus trying to deal with it on your desktop or as a weird one-off.
And if you could, maybe give us a little bit deeper dive into the company's technology offering.
Yeah, we have a couple of flavors. Like I said, we've always been built as a cloud. So we literally take, and there's crazy pictures we could show online, but we have 30,000 Apple desktops because Apple does not make enterprise class hardware. We have them deployed all over the world in data centers. So we engineer racks and networking and systems to turn desktop solutions into enterprise class hardware. And we create a true cloud system out of that. Relative to KubeCon, we've built a technology called Orka, which literally virtualizes macOS, puts it in a container and orchestrates it with Kubernetes as a pod. And we layer that on actual Apple hardware. So we're running Kubernetes on Apple hardware, and we're orchestrating macOS in Kubernetes as a cluster. So you can kubectl your Apple VMs, and you can use it for ephemeral builds and scale up, scale down. And that's kind of our big technology. It then integrates into a lot of CI/CD platforms and a lot of plugins and tools and integrations into the ecosystem to really, again, bring tooling to the developer.
And it sounds like what you guys are offering is pretty unique. Do you have competitors in the market?
I will say not in the Kubernetes space at all. We've definitely created, or in the early days, we sort of referred to it as a turducken because you're stuffing a VM inside of a container and we're wrapping it in Kubernetes and you're putting it on app. But it really does serve a unique purpose. there are, there are clouds, AWS, for example, that do offer Mac in the cloud, but it's a bare metal offering and it's automation, not virtualization or orchestration like we're delivering. So from our perspective, we're extremely unique in the fact that we're bringing containerized orchestration via Kubernetes and pairing that with Apple. We're the people in the world that are translating Mac resources to Kubernetes.
And do you have any announcements that you're making here at the show?
We've just put out a recent release that allows our environments to handle both the new Apple Silicon platform, all the new Apple Silicon models, as well as the Intel models that it previously did. So our clouds were previously based on Intel Mac, and then of course Apple blessed us with changing the entire hardware architecture. So we took another swag at it, and we have now the ability to handle both types of architectures. We've also added a lot for the Kubernetes crowd. We've added a lot of observability and monitoring capability with Prometheus endpoints, with Grafana integration, and we're pretty proud of that. We're keeping up with conformance on the latest Kubernetes platform, and then we do plan on teasing some things at our booth to talk about sort of our 2023 roadmap, where we're moving this platform to be truly a plugin for Kubernetes versus a managed Kubernetes platform, where you'll ultimately one day be able to sort of download it and plug it into your cluster versus having to use our cloud specifically.
Now, we're going to hear a lot of things about, big picture talk on the keynote stage during KubeCon. What big themes and trends does your company seem to be more interested in as we head into 2023?
Yeah, I think it's the opsification of things, if I could call it that. DevOps, GitOps, SecOps. We see that move happening quite a bit, where sort of everything as code orchestrated as quickly as possible, which is obviously the whole idea of this stuff in the first place. But that and the recent global changes for the past 2.5 years have really changed the game on cloud adoption and hybrid cloud and multi-cloud and how people are honestly distributing resources. And we're seeing a lot of sort of interesting demand on how you can leverage the cloud to handle those situations. So we see that as a big idea that's really been pushing in 2022 and will continue to expand into 2023.
And I guess, would we be able to see a quick demo of the product?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull one up and we can walk through it. So this is what we're going to see. Orka, again, it's a Kubernetes cluster running in our cloud, which is based on Apple hardware. You're going to see Intel and Apple nodes running side by side mixed together. And you're going to see VMs get created with Kubernetes on Apple hardware using a version of Monterey running on an M1 node. And then at the end, we're going to kind of tie it all together to the real use case where a developer uses Jenkins to actually create a build on Apple with Kubernetes with Orka. So we have our K9s environment here. We're logging in through a UI that Orka provides that gives you a view of your actual cloud. Those are nodes, which are literally physical Macs, but they're also nodes in the Kubernetes sense of the word. They have ports and IP addresses and all the things. We're going over here to verify that we have created a VM, which is in our world wrapped in a pod so that Kubernetes can orchestrate it. We're grabbing a console to that so we can see not just interesting console data, but you can actually see with a command, we've quickly and easily spun up an ephemeral version of macOS running Catalina. We're going to then go back and do that again. We're going to now grab a config for the M1. So that was an Intel version of a Mac. We're going to now deploy onto an M1, which is a totally different hardware architecture and honestly a different VM format altogether. But Orka helps Kubernetes translate what type of resource it is, how that resource is deployed, and what that resource can use as targets. Again, we're spinning it up, showing you a different version of the VM, doing a little bit of about this Mac to prove we're showing you what we're showing you. So now you have an Intel VM and an M1 VM, same cluster, all managed by the same control plane. And then we're going to go down here and use kubectl actually to reach in through the pod to the VM itself and spin up something like Safari. So We've got a kubectl exec command there, and the Safari browser kicked off inside the actual Apple VM that was spun up by the pod. From here, we're pulling up an instance of Jenkins. The big use case for Orka is for Apple development. A lot of folks need to spin up fleets of VMs, run their compiles, builds, and tests for iOS, macOS, and other things. They use tools like Jenkins or GitHub or GitLab. In this case, we're spinning up a Jenkins environment. We're pointing a build at the cloud. We're adding a template for VMs, and then we're going to click on M1, and we're going to put our credentials in here. This will basically just add a Jenkins agent onto that VM you saw spin up, or correction, that'll add a Jenkins agent onto a VM when it spins up. And we're putting a little label on it so we know what we're looking at in the test, and a prefix. We save the information. We create a build project, and we run it. So let's see here. And we're going to exec a shell too, so we'll put a command into the exec build. So when we run the build, we'll be able to see the output there and make sure that we've gotten the data. You can see the pod spin up on the other side with the VM created with the Jenkins agent in it. The Jenkins agent takes a moment to spin up and connect back online. It's active, it's spun up, and it printed out our command so that we can see the VM has done its build and is successful. And that is the Orka system at work. It's designed to make it quick and easy with infrastructure as code to create a massive fleet of Apple devices to do your work.
Hey, thanks for that great demo. We really appreciate it. Looked fantastic. Before we let you go, where can folks go if they want to learn more about some of the things we talked about today or what we saw?
Great. Yeah, you can always check us out online at www.macstadium.com. And then specifically on that website, if you go to macstadium.com/Orka, that'll take you to our Kubernetes platform and the Kubernetes page. We're also at KubeCon and we have a booth. So we would love for you to swing by. We love talking use cases and specific examples, and we'll be there to also give a little bit of demo and walkthrough in person as well if there's something more specific or different you want to see.
Great. Well, thanks again for being online with VMblog talking about KubeCon.
Thank you.